We're down to the single digits. Only 8 more days in the legislative session, and the pressure is on for hot-button issues like the Pastor Protection First Amendment Defense Act and campus carry. These are exactly the kind of issues that legislators take home as they run for re-election. And do you like to roll down the river with an adult beverage? The Floating Under the Influence bill is bobbing right along under the Gold Dome, just in time for spring break. Lawmakers starts right now. Welcome to Lawmakers. I'm Bill Nigut. It is day 32 of the 2016 legislative session. Some big news today as the Senate Judiciary Committee votes to allow campus carry at Georgia public colleges and universities. Let's go to Shelby Lin for the latest on this and other news in her Capitol report. Hi, Shelby.
That's right, Bill. Campus carry legislation took front and center at the Capitol today. A key Senate committee passed House Bill 859 on a vote of 5-3 at a packed hearing this afternoon. The measure has moved quickly through the General Assembly this session after a campus carry provision was removed 2 years ago from legislation that legalized concealed guns in most public places in Georgia. The bill also moved quickly out of committee today after efforts at amending the legislation failed. The Senate Judiciary Committee passed HB 859 in less than a half hour. The legislation would make it legal for people 21 and older with a weapons permit to carry guns on public colleges and universities across Georgia. Republican Representatives Mandy Ballinger and Rick Jaspers sponsored the bill.
This bill is about personal safety, the ability of Georgians to defend themselves if needed. The issues of carelessness, anxiety, and such is not born in fact. These Georgians we're talking about are responsible. Their track record has shown it. The problem it will solve is Georgians' ability to defend themselves.
It's about freedom. It's about freedom for our college students to be able to defend themselves, to not be victims. It's not a mandate. It's not a you have to. It's about changing perceptions. And it's about allowing people the freedom in the state of Georgia on our college campuses to not be victims.
5 amendments were put forward during the hearing, including 3 from Democrat Vincent Fort. Jaspers made it clear right away that he did not support amending the measure in any way. One of the amendments would have allowed law enforcement officials to ask to see a gun permit from a person carrying a weapon.
It just seems to me that it's a reasonable, common sense amendment to say to strike that provision. And that's what this amendment does. It will allow law enforcement to make inquiry with someone whether or not they have a license, weapons carry license in order to carry a weapon. And it seems to me when you're talking about campus carry, you're talking about 21-year-olds, 22-year-olds, and it seems to me that it cries out for the need for training. As it exists now, the person who applies for a carry permit, from what I understand, does not have that they have had any training.
Another amendment would have allowed a non-binding vote in November on whether Georgians support campus carry legislation.
All those in favor of the motion to amend, please signify by raising your hands. All right, all opposed? That fails 2-6.
All the amendments failed. The crowd that packed into the hearing room was upset at times and voiced their support for the amendments. In fact, so much so, Committee Chair Josh McCoon threatened to have everyone ejected from the room. In the end, HB 859 easily passed out of committee.
All those in favor, please signify by raising your hands. All opposed? That passes 5-3. That concludes our agenda. We are adjourned.
Opponents of the campus carry law, like Carol Allen with the group Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense, became very vocal after the vote. Allen is frustrated. She says HB 859 will make campuses less safe for students and faculty. She also says polls show that 78% of Georgians are against this measure.
These senators do not care about the citizens of this state. They don't care at all. They don't care what we think. They're doing what they want. They are in the back pocket of the gun lobby. The gun lobby's in their back pocket. Georgia Carey, that's who they represent. If you think that these senators represent you on this bill, they don't.
Allen and other campus carry opponents were very upset after the hearing, Bill, as you could hear in that last soundbite. But HB 859 has support from both the leadership in the House and Senate and Governor Nathan Deal. The measure could come up for a vote on the Senate floor before the end of the week. Georgians might soon be able to legally drink alcohol while floating on a raft or inner tube with some restrictions. The Senate approved HB 172 today, a measure that's called the Boating Under the Influence Bill.
House Bill 172 is dealing with boating under the influence. A couple years ago, we passed a bill, and I think inadvertently left code section pretty vague that allows for what type of water vessels would be under that code section. Homemade or inflatable raft simply means any platform that floats on the water for the purpose of providing buoyancy to a person, in which renders propulsion with the aid of one's arms, hands, legs, or feet. It also recognizes an inner tube or homemade raft as a personal flotation device when used within 100 feet of the shoreline.
The bill passed in the Senate on a vote of 49-1, but because senators made a few tweaks, it goes back to the House for a vote on the changes. If the House approves the measure, it will head to the governor's desk for his signature. Also in the Senate today, the 2017 state budget is one step closer to finalization. The Senate Appropriations Committee approved its version of the $24 billion budget. The full Senate will vote on the revised spending plan later this week. Once approved, the Senate will send the fiscal plan back to the House, where negotiators hope to reach a final budget. The legislature must pass the final financial blueprint before the end of the session, scheduled right now for March 24th. Both the House and the Senate have passed bills that would allow athletes to wear religious expressions on their headbands or uniforms. Today, the Senate held its first hearing on HB 870, the House version of the bill, but we learned today the language of the measure has changed to allow all forms of expression. The bill was prompted by an incident last year when a high school athlete was disqualified from a competition because he was wearing a biblical verse on his headband. But Representative Brian Strickland amended the language in the bill to include other forms of personal expression if the rules of the event allow it.
If you're going to allow expression, whether it's religious expression, any type of personal expression, you can't pick and choose the type that you're going to allow. Of course, this comes from the issue though with the headband last year, and there was a dispute about what happened at that. I think it was a cross-country meet. Dispute about whether or not the rules actually allowed a headband to be worn with things on it. This clears all that up. It says that the High School Association has to allow expression. It can't pick and choose a type of expression if the rules allow that expression.
Glenn White of the Georgia High School Association also testified. He says he understands why lawmakers are trying to change the law. White also said he's willing to work to find a solution.
We would be in support of that. We're trying to find common ground so we can work with everybody and make sure this works for our athletes and our schools. And we're also concerned about safety of our students who participate in some of these events. We don't want certain symbols exhibited at events which would cause problems as far as the safety of the participants or cause even more problems in the crowd.
The Senate Judiciary Committee did not vote on HB 870 today, Bill, but several senators say they aren't sure the changes in the bill are needed. We'll let you know what happens next on this one. That's it from the Capitol. Back to you in the studio.
All right, Shelby, thank you so much. We'll see you again tomorrow night. So I'm here tonight on set with Jim Galloway, the longtime political writer at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, Senator Elena Parent, she's a Democrat representing Atlanta, and Representative Kevin Tanner, a Republican from up there in Dawsonville. Thank you all so much for being with us tonight. Before we start talking, let's look at a new anti-campus carry ad that was released recently by the national group Every Town for Gun Safety, and use that as a point of departure. Watch.
College tests a student's judgment and responsibility, and sometimes students make bad decisions, especially when alcohol is involved. Add guns to the mix and those bad decisions can turn deadly. That's why college presidents, campus police chiefs, and Georgians agree guns in the hands of college kids in classrooms, at tailgates, or at parties is a bad idea. But Georgia politicians are trying to force guns onto college campuses anyway. Tell your state legislator, college students, guns, and alcohol don't mix.
So clearly, Representative Tanner, if I could start with you, an ad that urges senators now to defeat campus carry. It doesn't strike me that that's a likely scenario. What do you think about what's happening with that bill?
I don't think so. I think with the governor coming out in support of the legislation last week, that there's a very good chance that that bill will move through the Senate and get to the governor's desk for signature. And the House passed it primarily along party lines, but I think we'll see probably the same thing in the Senate.
Senator Parent, your take on all of this. You're going to have to deal with this.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think it's a very curious thing. You know, I mean, we know that Georgians in general are opposed. We know that the university presidents are all opposed. Students on college campuses are opposed. All 29 police chiefs are opposed. I'm not sure why the legislature feels the need to ram this down the throats of Georgia's universities. I might note that Jan Brewer in Arizona vetoed a similar bill several years ago because the facts just don't match up with any of the protect oneself rhetoric.
And just given that level of opposition, I'm going to be very interested, if this bill passes, if the governor signs it, how implementation is conducted, because you have such strong opposition within university circles.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting point, Representative Tanner. What happens on a college campus where the administration is aligned against the measure? They're going to have no choice to deal with it, but there are an awful lot of things that have to happen around campus carry, things that have to be put in place, and you're going to need administrators to be able to agree to do and to move forward on, yes?
Well, I think it's important to keep in mind that we're talking about, currently it's a gun-free zone, and we saw University of Tech of Virginia or the Colorado theater shooting. They all have one thing in common, and they're gun-free zones. This just extends the Second Amendment right to these students to be able to carry a gun onto a college campus. They have to be 21, which I think is an important thing to note. Many of our college students today are adults that are attending college. They're not a traditional student, and this just gives them that opportunity to extend their Second Amendment rights. They also have to be licensed, so they went through a background check. That has been no felony convictions, and they have that license to carry. So I don't think we'll have any issues implementing. I think that once the college presidents realize that this is going to be the law in Georgia, they will be in compliance with that.
Well, first of all, it's complete mythical thinking that crimes are averted by the presence of a weapon. And for the very, very few times that occurs, it is completely outweighed by huge numbers of accidents and suicide. And the fact of the matter is that a presence of a gun simply does not make things safer. And I might note as well that Texas has lost a renowned dean over their campus carry. Faculty in Texas have started to aggressively push back on this, and I think the opinions of those that actually run our colleges and teach our students should not be so easily dismissed. What is it about the wisdom of the legislature that does not run any college of Georgia or is not charged with keeping the students safe that makes us think that we should substitute our judgment?
No, we know that the bill would not permit, and we're just talking handguns, correct?
That's correct.
Handguns in dormitories, fraternity houses, or sorority houses, and athletic events. Would faculty have any kind of control over what comes into their classroom, what does not?
I don't believe so.
Well, the guns would have to be concealed. That was a change made from the original version that was introduced. So the guns would have to be concealed. So folks who are in class with guns that have carrying permits, the other people around them wouldn't know they even had one. And the thing I think we have to keep in mind that I spent 20 years working in law enforcement, and I can tell you firsthand that a bad person with a gun is not concerned about what the law is, whether they can have a gun legally on a college campus. This just allows law-abiding adults who have a carrying concealed permit to be able to protect themselves, and I think that's important.
Is this already happening?
is what already happened.
Do we already have handguns on campus concealed?
Not currently in Georgia.
Not legally.
Not legally.
Not legally.
But absolutely, there are handguns in Georgia on college campuses illegally. There's handguns everywhere in Georgia that are being carried by bad people. So yes,
let me
by good people.
That's correct.
Senator Rick Jaspers, author of the bill, and others who support the legislation, they always point out that after the so-called Guns Everywhere legislation passed last year, there has been no incident that suggests that people have wantonly gone out and shot up a restaurant or another public place where they've carried their weapons. And they say that points to the fact that these are alarmist concerns that the opponents like yourself are raising.
Well, I find that interesting because I do know that on the eve of the last Guns Everywhere bill going into effect, a gentleman terrorized a Little League game. Then there's the infamous case of the gentleman who bullied travelers at Hartsfield. To me, those are not incidents to be laughed off. Okay. I think people were afraid. I think it's a tragedy that law enforcement had to be diverted to the incidents of checking out, what people were doing, sort of terrorizing and bullying average citizens. And, we're talking about a different sphere entirely in college campuses. And as a matter of fact, we don't have to guess. Both in Utah and Colorado, campus rape has gone up since they instituted campus carry.
So, Representative Tanner, let me ask you a different question about this. We taped an interview earlier this evening that'll air tomorrow night with Senator Tommy Williams, a Republican about to retire, and people will hear his thoughts on this show tomorrow evening. And he made an interesting comment. He's not running for re-election. Mm-hmm. And he said, at a certain point, we've just got to stop continuing to pass gun legislation. Here's a Republican, and a pretty conservative one in many ways, who now freed from worrying about re-election feels, I think, a little easier about making a comment like that. How much does having to go back home and run for re-election play into how you all look at an issue, a hot-button issue like this?
I think that would be an individual question. For me personally, I try to make all my decisions based on what's in the best interest of Georgians, not concerned about getting reelected. I think if you come to Atlanta being concerned about the next election, you're not going to do a good job for Georgians. Personally, my personal opinion on this issue is I'm a very staunch supporter of the Second Amendment, and I think that the Second Amendment shall not be infringed. And unless someone has committed a crime and if they're of age, they should have a right to carry a gun. And I don't think that should stop at a college campus. We have solved since 2007, the violent crime rate in Georgia has decreased, but on college campuses it continues to rise at a very alarming rate. And I just think I have 3 daughters who are all going to be going into college, and I'm concerned about their inability under current Georgia law to carry a firearm onto a college campus and protect themselves when they walk from their cars to their classrooms. And I think we're doing a disservice to our young people and not being able to protect themselves.
Jim, we're going to talk in a few minutes about where the religious liberty bills stand right now, but you've been hearing these reports that, it's the Senate that's been gung-ho for religious liberty, more extreme, some would call them extreme measures, and the House that's kind of pushed back on that. It's the House that's gung-ho over campus carry and other gun bills, and the Senate that's pushed back a bit. And you've heard rumors that there might be some horse trading here.
Right. I mean, there's and it wouldn't be unheard of. But you have each chamber specializes in their social conservative issue. And often you have kind of a little contest to see who will move on the other chamber's specialty first. I think in this case you do have something different going on with the governor signaling that he's on the side of campus carry for the first time in his career as governor. He ran for re-election saying he would oppose it. So that's a big change. And then on the other hand, he's kind of signaled his impatience with a lot of the hard pressers on religious liberty.
You're going to have a hard time. I mean, obviously you're outnumbered in the Senate, as Kevin Tanner said. In the House, this came down along party lines. It's going to do the same in the Senate. So it's going to be pretty hard to stop this, isn't it?
Yes, but I do think that this one, it's very clear where the opinion is. I think it's serious overreaching.
but it'll pass.
I would suggest that there is one person not running for re-election who could follow Governor Jan Brewer's lead and recognize the opinion he's always held and veto this legislation.
All right. Well, I hope the governor's watching to hear your advice on that.
I'll be happy to repeat it for him. If
All right. I'll tell you what, we have to take a break. When we come back, let's talk about religious liberty. You're the author of a House bill on this, so we should get your take on where we're headed with that. So coming up on Lawmakers, we'll have a look at the evolution of this bill, the Pastor Protection Act, and how it's become one of the most hotly debated pieces of legislation again this session. But first, how well do you know your lawmakers? Senator Charlie Bethel is a Republican representing District 54. He was sworn into the General Assembly in 2011. A native of Dalton, Bethel's family farm was once owned by Colonel and later Governor John Gordon and his family. He comes from a long line of coin collectors and says he'll one day be responsible for managing the family coin collection. Bethel is also proud of the fact that he's related to Roald Amundsen, the first man to lead a successful expedition to the South Pole in 1910. We'll be back with more Lawmakers in a moment.
Thousands of years, people have been searching for ways to stay younger longer. Exercise techniques have evolved and improved, and now from the creator of the Esmond Technique comes a new program, Aging Backwards. Host Miranda Esmond White believes the human body is designed to stay young, and Aging Backwards provides a plan for moving without pain, preventing further injury, and turning back the hands of time.
Tuesday at 7 on GPB.
Exactly 150 years ago, March 7th in 1866, Governor Charles Jenkins signed a joint resolution of the General Assembly creating a joint House-Senate committee to implement a common school system for the state. Welcome back to Lawmakers. I'm here tonight with the HAC's Jim Galloway, Senator Elena Parent, and Representative Kevin Tanner. Well, here we are again, Representative Tanner. Once again, a session has a lot of controversy over religious liberty brewing up. You authored the House, or introduced the House version of pastor protection. Of course, you now are dealing with the Senate version, which adds Senator Greg Kirk's requirements that would deal with what some people think is real prejudice against the gay and lesbian community, giving protections to businesses, nonprofit religious organizations, that sort of thing. Where do you think all this is headed? It's back in your court.
Well, it is a very difficult issue, and it's one that's going to require some patience and a measured response. And I'm very pleased with Speaker Ralston and how he's kind of taken the lead in this issue over the last year. We introduced pastor protection. It was an area that we received a lot of calls on after the Supreme Court decision from pastors, their wives, concerned that their husband or them were going to go to jail for not marrying a gay couple. Tried to reassure them that that wasn't the case. We felt like we needed to introduce some legislation, and we were able to get 100% commitment from Democrats and Republicans to move this bill forward through the House. We knew that when it went to the Senate that there would be changes made, and there has been. FATA has been added to House Bill 7.
First Amendment Defense Act.
Correct.
Greg Kirk.
And now it's back for an agree-disagree, and we're having conversations, listening to caucus members on both in the minority and majority caucus in the House, conversations with leadership in the Senate and with the governor and others to try to determine the best way forward. I believe there is a way to reach some consensus and have a good measure that will pass.
How did you interpret the governor's remarks on this? I mean, did you see this as constructive criticism or a signal that this thing is dead? Because he did say he would walk away from it if it wasn't the right package.
Yeah, no, I don't think the governor is intending that it's dead. I think the governor is encouraging the House and Senate to work together and find some common ground on this issue that does protect what we're concerned about, the fundamental religious liberties that people are concerned, whether it's the business community, the faith-based community, but also to make sure that we don't allow for very obvious discrimination. And I think the governor's just concerned that we move forward in that way. And I'm hopeful that we're going to be able to do that. There's some very good conversations going on from all sides of this issue, and I really believe we're going to find a balanced approach.
Senator, if this ended up with a measure that did nothing more than Kevin Tanner's initial legislation, pastor protection, saying that members of the clergy do not have to marry gays or lesbians or others they don't want to, which of course is protected by the Constitution fundamentally in the first place, we think. Would you be okay with that if we did get a Pastor Protection Act passed and signed into law?
I would be okay with that. I mean, my view is it's not really necessary. But, if there are folks that are nervous about the state of current law and need reassurance, that's fine. And if we need to come together in a bipartisan fashion to demonstrate that that's the case, I would be okay with that.
And what about you? You introduced pastor protection, so you'd be happy if that was what came out? You don't need anything more, or do you?
Well, I think it's important that we listen to the concerns of Georgians, and I've had a lot of business owners call and that are concerned about they run a business, they don't want to be forced to provide a good or service for a religious ceremony. And when I talk to folks on all sides of this issue, there seems to be a way to balance this conversation. We all have certain rights, and I think sometimes those rights rub up against each other. And then this is a case where, a gay couple wants a baker to bake a cake for their wedding and they don't want to have to do that. That's different than coming into that restaurant and buying a meal.
Jim?
I think what we're going to see on this is, I think we're still going to be in these quiet conversations. We started an important process today, and that was qualifying for the primary, for the May 24th primary, 77 days until the election. And I think what we're going to do is we're going to be waiting to see who has opposition come noon on Friday and who doesn't. And that will begin to work into the calculations of when this moves and how it moves.
Because you're suggesting that some legislators could particularly face challenges from the right, I assume. I mean, they're not going to come from the left, clearly. It's a Republican-controlled legislature.
Right. And at that point, you'll be able to count votes. And to see who's in danger if the bill turns this way, and who will be in danger if it turns that way.
Does that sound like a reasonable? What Jim Galloway says sounds like it makes sense to me.
Well, I want to say this, that what I have found in this conversation is that it really depends. It's not as much about Democrat, Republican. The opinion varies on what part of the state you're from, what part of the state you represent. People who represent some of the metro areas may have a different view on this than the constituents that I represent in the very conservative 9th District. So I'm not sure it's just a partisan issue. I think it also depends on what part of the state you represent.
Right. We are about to run out of time. Very quickly, Jim, you mentioned qualifying started today. Brandon Beach in the Senate has pushed hard for transit. He's gotten shot down, and now he's got what?
He's got a primary challenge from Aaron Barlow, an entrepreneur and a philanthropist, self-funder up in North Fulton.
Someone who we assume opposes. He's already said he opposes.
He very much opposes extending MARTA rail up through North Fulton.
So if nothing else, he's being punished for his support. Brandon Beach is for his support.
But what it also means is you're going to see this debate over MARTA rail extend well into the summer.
All right, we are completely out of time. Senator Elena Parent, we appreciate your being here. Kevin Tanner, Representative Tanner, thank you for being here. But you know what? Before we leave you tonight, we want to share with you something that's very near and dear to our hearts here at GPB. Our news director, Eric Burns, has a son who plays on the Allatoona Buccaneers football team, and they won the 5A state football championship a couple weeks back, and today they were recognized in the House. Let's show you.
I've heard it said that one should always seek to be more than they appear. It's not about flashiness, it's about doing the right thing when nobody's looking, doing the hard work over the summer, doing the hard work in the weight room, doing the hard work in the classroom, and that's something that I'm proud to say I think Allatoona High School embodies. But some of their ball players are Boy Scouts. They're involved in their community in a very significant way, and I wanted to honor them not just for their championship, but for their citizenship. They say that defense wins championships. The 5A state championship this year was a 10-6 defensive battle in the Dome, and it came down to a battle of wills among two very, very good teams. I'd like the gentleman from Alatoona High School football team to please rise and be recognized.
All right. Congratulations to the Alatoona High School football team and Eric Burns' son, Brooks. He got his kid on TV. Way to go, Eric. That's it for us for day 32. We've got 8 legislative days to go before Sine Die, which is scheduled for March 24th. You can follow us on Facebook and Twitter at GPB News for all the latest political news, or check out our website. We'll give you all the news you need. I'm Bill Nigut. Good night.